Morning Grinders. Welcome to the DFS pregame show here on RotoGrinders. I'm Jordan Cooper, aka Blender HD. If you want to follow me on Twitter. And it's Monday. So you know what we do on Mondays? We bring in James McCool, the co-author, with me on the theory of daily fantasy sports. It's a 15-hour audio DFS masterclass that you can pick up at theoryofdfs.com. Mondays with McCool. Rise and shine, everyone in the chat room. I see Suki Singh's here. Usual. Played a 5-3 Philadelphia Atlantic stack on Sunday and scored only 34 points. I didn't play on Sunday, but get him again today. Doug Montgomery's here. Happy Monday. Good morning. Good morning, Matt Mears, Daniel Hutchins, Nerdy Tenor in the chat joining us as well. Sundays I'm not playing anymore. I mean, pretty much Sunday, unless there's going to be NFL or soccer or something, probably not. But James, I did play on Saturday night. MMA was a pay-per-view card, and it was the first round of the MMA World Championship, whatever the hell.
Yeah.
So so what they're doing for MMA, obviously they don't want to spend that much money on a live final for MMA. So they're not having 100 people there and they're plus ones and renting out a huge place and all that type of stuff. So there were qualifiers for 70 qualifiers. And then in round one, which was on Saturday, they're going to knock down 70 to 30. And then on the next pay-per-view card on July 2nd, they're going to knock 30 down to 10. And then those 10 go to Dallas for UFC 277 and whatever they do that weekend and whatever. You know, you get the trip and the whatever the hell they do. Obviously, I put in, to qualify. I got one entry. And because I'll take shots sometimes. I know I'm not a live final person, but it's like I think I have an edge in MMA. Why don't I take some shots at MMA? And so in this past round, the top 30 advanced, and I sort of advanced. So what I did, and I'll explain the journey to this. Basically, it was a 6-way tie for 27th. So that's 32 people, and apparently it's not like golf, where it's like top 30 and ties. It's like, no, it's just the top 30. So they will be running this coming card on a fight night card, a 6-man tiebreaker, top 4 go to the top 30. And I wouldn't be shocked if they have to run another tiebreaker also after that, just by the fact of what type of lineup that all 6 of us played. It wouldn't completely shock me, James. It wouldn't be not so shocking if all 6 of us had the same lineup on Saturday. Now, James, why would that be a case? I was actually kind of shocked that out of the 70 competitors, and it's 70 entries, some people have multiple entries.
Yeah.
I was a little bit shocked that this lineup only was a 6-way tie. Like only 6 people had it. Yeah. I was expecting more because this lineup was the highest cumulative ownership lineup with the highest money line value that stacked one of the 2-round fights. Okay. What I was James, this is, and I had a conversation with someone else that was in actually Pimple Popper MD I had a conversation with, because he's in there also, about whether or not to play this line. Because like basically we both said, like, this seems like the obvious, like, highest floor money line value ownership lineup, like in a contest where it's functionally a double up, right? Top 30 out of 70, right? It's not a 50-50. That would be 35 out of 70, 30 out of 70. So your goal is to just optimize to beat half the field pretty much. And in MMA DFS, it's typically stacking the main event and then the four fighters combined that have the best line value for their price. Like the pricing comes out on Sunday night or Monday, and then the lines move, and a fighter that, was originally minus 115 is now minus 160 at 8,200. It's like, okay, they should be 8,600. Steve Garcia was 8,300, 8,400. He ended up as a minus 180 favorite. Liang Na ended up as the favorite in this fight, even though she lost. She was originally lined as the underdog, plus 130. So that's why she was 7,600. And then Shevchenko was the hugest favorite on the slate. And then Prochaska and Teixeira was the main event. And like, that's a very simple way. And also, it's the most owned lineup, like cumulatively. The problem with this lineup for GPP purposes is that you can't have 6 winners in your lineup because you're stacking the main event. There's a very outlier main event that the loser scored 106 points, but typically that won't happen. But you're guaranteeing yourself getting the winner of the main event, which is typically a 100+ point score. And then typically you need 4 winners to win in a double. Typically. Sometimes it's lower, sometimes it's higher. But if you can get 4 wins, no matter really even what the score is, even a 70-point win, so you could typically survive 1 loser. You could survive 2 losers, right? With one of them being the main event loser because you have both of them in your lineup. Because of Teixeira outperforming as a loser, because that was a 5-round fight with tons of action. Like this lineup, after Garcia Na lost at huge ownership, I was like, I'm dead, right? But the thing is, in these types of contests, like I was shocked to see so few people play this type of lineup. I saw some people stack the other fight, the Shevchenko-Santos fight, which I got also because that fight was more likely to go longer. So Santos, even in a loss, may score 40 or 50 points, and you're not looking to get coming first. But it was kind of shocking to see that because it seems like a lot of the people that were in this contest, or this is my assumption is, James, that a lot of people in this contest are more GPP oriented players that don't play cash games in MMA. And it's not like I really play cash games in MMA, but I play cash games in other sports. And a lot of them played it like it was a GPP, but that kind of, you fail the fundamental conceptual differences between cash games and GPPs. Like
I absolutely love these formats. I love when DraftKings runs this kind of stuff because it's a hybrid contest, right? Where like the first 3 runs of it, if it's like 4 iterations, first 3 runs are cash games where you're just like beat half the field, go on to the next one because you don't win anything by taking first in this one. It doesn't matter. So get through. And if you have multiple lineups, like I know that the Brian Jesters, he had how many entries he had in this?
I know he had at least 4.
Yeah. So he has 4. And then there's that other layer of like, oh, well, am I going to run a train of 4 of the same lineup and push that across? Or am I going to try to diversify and just try to get a couple across? Like, I think these formats are really, really cool. And they do, like you said, you have to employ the fundamental difference between a cash game lineup and a GPP lineup in order to succeed. I think that these contests are brilliant. I think they're awesome.
Right, because the first round is functionally a double up. The second round is functionally a triple up. And the third, and the final is a 10-man GPP, a 10-man progressive payout structure contest. The point is that whenever you look at a contest, okay, I know it's saying cash games versus GPPs, but it's really progressive payout formats, payout structures, and non-progressive payout structures, or less progressive. Because progressive means 10th gets 10,000. ninth gets 20,000. It goes up. And typically in large field GPPs, especially any GPP, it's a hockey stick kind of type of thing. Once you get to the 10th, it kind of goes up, 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 up. But what does the distribution look like for a double up? It's 0 and then a step. And then it's $10 and then it's $10 all the way to there's no more progression anymore. So like you have to weigh the upside versus downside in the contests that you play. So in a cash game set, in a double up setting, which is what this contest is, what does leverage gain you?
Hardly anything.
Hardly anything. What, by having more leverage, where's the downside? Like, what's the upside risk versus the downside risk? So, like in GPPs in a progressive payout structure, you want leverage. You want to be different, right? You want to sacrifice projection. You want to sacrifice win probability of the fighters. And yeah, because if Na is 65% owned and you play Silvana Gomez Juarez, her opponent, at whatever, 8%, whatever she was, in this contest, she was 7%. So that difference, 65 versus 7. If you're right, how much more do you win? Well, coming in first, this person that came in first didn't win any more than the person that came in 26th, at least.
I was going to say, especially in this contest, literally nothing more.
Right.
Nothing more.
Okay, but what happens if Na wins? And like, let's say the scores are reversed. I'm using this person as an example. I'm not looking to call people. I don't even know who this is. But if you take a look, Gomez Juarez scored 103.60. Na scored 1.87 because the fight ended at 60 seconds in, whatever. Let's say that score was reversed. Let's say Na got a submission first round, whatever, and Gomez Juarez scored 2 points and Na scored 103. Well, that's a 100-point difference up and down of your score. So this guy would have scored 540 instead, right? And then 65% of the lineups in the contest have an extra 100 points. Well, look at my lineup, which was tied for 27th. If I had 100 more points in my lineup because of Na, I would end up with 558. He would lose 100 points and end up with 540. Wouldn't to qualify, wouldn't to come in the top 30. So what was the point of this? Like if one of these things, if a 65% owned fighter wins and you have their opponent at 7%, what happens when you're right? Oh, you come in first in a contest that you only need to come in the top 30. What happens when you're wrong? You're dead. Like you 65% of your opponents have 100 points that you do not have. Right? And then he also played Mahashate, 4% owned, against the second highest owned non-main event fighter on the slate, right? You look at my lineup for line value, 52%. So if either of them, let's say, if either of them win and put up, let's say the scores are reversed. If Garcia would have won instead of Mahashate, he's dead. And if Mahashate wins, he comes in first, which is no different than 26th. So it's not a matter of like, well, what happens if he gets one of them right? He's still dead because the other one is still the 50% of the field have those points that he doesn't have. Now in GPPs, this is exactly what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's the whole concept of leverage. Right, yeah,
exactly.
But the difference between coming in 30th and coming in first doesn't mean anything. So when people want to play different for contests with these type of structures, you have so much downside and not that much upside. And now on the other hand, in GPPs, if you were to play this line like this lineup, if you were to play this in literally any GPP, like I'm not even talking about the large field, like if you played at 100-man, if this was a 70-man contest that was progressively paid out, this would be the worst lineup that you could make. Like it's literally the worst. I would look at this contest and go, if you paid, it's 100,000 a first, and just like it was a live final, like you would be dumb. You'd be an idiot to play this lineup, right? The most owned lineup with a stack. You can't get 6 wins. Like there's no chance you would. And that's only the byproduct of the payout structure.
Yep. Yeah, there's a reason why whenever anybody asks, because I get asked specifically in NFL season, right? I'll get asked like, oh, well, what do you do for cash games? And I'm like, I literally play the highest owned possible lineup that I can find, like the highest cumulative ownership lineup. You don't even need projections to build cash games for most sports. Like,
well, we need ownership projections.
You need ownership projections. You don't need performance projections. Like, you don't need to be able to project like the performance of a player in order to do well in cash games. You literally just need to say, what is the highest possible owned lineup that I can make? And sometimes that's a little bit harder, right? Like in NFL, it's really easy, I think. And in NBA, it's pretty easy. In baseball, it's really, really hard to do it because ownership is pretty spread out. But like in NFL, NBA, where there's a lot of ownership condensation on specific players, and like you can kind of figure out, oh, well, this is going to be the lineup. You have like 6 guys out of the lineup that are like, these guys are going to be owned. There's a 3K player who's starting in NBA. He's going to be there. There's Giannis, who's the only stud on the slate. He's going to be there. You can pretty much list out 6 guys. And the rest of it is just plug and play based on, whatever. But you don't need to be able to project players. You just need to be able to project ownership. And the reason for that is this lineup that you played with a 65%, a 52%, a 51%, an 87%, and a 62%, right? Like if all of those guys do badly, it is still 60% of the field that has those guys. There's still even a chance, if all of those guys lose, of you coming close to the cash line with your last guy.
Right. It's quite possible this lineup. I mean, I could probably do some type of simulation. It's possible. I'm not saying it's likely, but it's possible that if Teixeira won with 100 points, like he won early in the first round at 34% owned, and then that means Prochaska lost, if Shevchenko lost to Santos, if Della Maddalena lost to Emiev, and Garcia and Na lost to their opponents, that this lineup with Teixeira's score still comes in the top 30. It's still possible because not many people have the opponents of all of these. Like Santos would be the problem because Santos is 25% owned, but like Emiev is like all these guys are single digit owned, and most of them are not in the same lineups as people. So it's like, dude, there are going to be a lot of lineups that literally only have one winner.
Yep. So
have one winner, and then do you have the highest scoring winner?
Yeah, there you go. That now you qualified, and
right.
and with
only because of the sharing of, like, this goes back to, in the theory of daily fantasy sports, the fundamental concept of relative value, which is a term I made up. Just how much value a player has to your lineup is not just a byproduct of the points they score, but on the ownership by how many people in the field have those points also. So by doing that in a contest where you do not get rewarded progressively, there's no downside. Like having points that other people have is not bad.
No, it's functionally a good thing in cash games.
Right. It's functionally a lower variance thing. Like if the opposite, sometimes people think the opposite. Sometimes I hear people sometimes in cash games, and this happens more at the higher stakes. Like when you mentioned play the highest owned lineup, that's something that probably is profitable. I'm almost definitely profitable at low stakes.
It is. Yeah, it is. Anything
at high stakes, it isn't. I can tell you that.
I believe that.
Right. Because high stakes people, like, you're looking to exploit people that play these types of lineups, because it's like, well, this is the highest owned lineup, but I don't agree with necessarily with this guy being a little bit higher than that guy. I think my lineup with the 2v2 wins more often than this lineup based on projection, based on some correlation differences or whatever like that, that you'd rather play that lineup. And if you're going to go in and you're going to constantly play this type of lineup in the high stakes, you're going to get beat by better players. You're not going to lose that much, right? It's not like it's the type of thing where you're going to get crushed. It's like, no, you're just going to lose out to the rake.
Well, and the big thing that I always explain it like this: when you build a lineup that is looking to maximize cumulative ownership, and you can optimize on ownership if you want to. I used to do that. The reason why you're doing it in cash games and specifically in like the larger sports, because you do it for the main sports, you don't really do it for the niche sports. But for NBA, NFL, MLB, stuff like that, the reason why it works is because if you're on an ownership that has a cumulative ownership around, or if you're on a lineup that has a cumulative ownership around 50% on average, something like this lineup, right, where you have one guy under 50% owned here, that means that it is no longer on you to be right. It's on the people who faded the high owned players to be right. So like it completely removes you from the equation of cashing. At this point, they have to prove that they are smarter than the field. They are smarter than the cumulative ownership lineup. And they are able to choose underdogs, right? Like lower owned players. They're able to hit on their underdogs more often than the favorites. So that's the entire thesis behind why you play high cumulative ownership lineups in cash games in the large sports. And I agree that in high stakes stuff, if you're playing 250s or 500s or $1,000 head to heads or whatever, you're constantly going up against people who are doing like Blender. If I play you in high stakes for a month, right? Like you're going to notice the trends of the way that I'm building lineups in the same way that you said for this contest, like the people who you played against, who you duped with your lineup, you said that you wouldn't be surprised if there was another large tie in the tiebreaker.
Because anyone that's building lineups this way is most likely, because what's going to happen?
That way again.
Right.
They're probably
James, it's going to be a game of chicken. I'm assuming. I mean, I haven't seen the card coming up. It's a 14 fight card, so there's more likelihood of being, maybe there's a 2v2 that is close or something like that you won't get some line value moves, but like. It's thinking in terms of anyone that built their lineups this way for this contest is most likely thinking in those terms for the next contest, and it becomes a chicken game.
Yeah, of do I want to do this again and risk getting duped, or do I want to be different and risk not getting duped? I love that.
But when you're paying for it, when you're advancing 4 out of 6, like this is I mentioned the conversation I had with Pimple Popper. I don't know his real name. I'll call him Pimple Popper.
Whatever. Yeah.
He's a dermatologist. That's why he's called that. When I saw that was to me the obvious lineup if you were going to play like a cash game lineup. I said I emailed my DK VIP person who never even got back to me, but someone from support got back to Pimple Popper, and I said, well, what happens if there's I just wanted to know. I assumed that more likely than not, you'd advance on a tie, right? But I didn't know. Maybe they'd be like, well, if there's a tie for 30th, it's not like golf, the top 30 in ties. You'd look and they go, oh, 27th place was tied too many times. We're just going to cut it off at 26, right? So if the ties didn't qualify, I wanted to know that, and I wanted to know what happened with all the ties. Let's say they said all the ties qualify. Well, that means if I think this lineup, which I don't have up on the screen, if I think this lineup is going to be duped, no matter how many times I think it's going to be duped, I should be more likely to play it, because as long as one of the train of people that played the lineup hits 30th place, I advance, right? So even if it's a 30th through 55th place, we're all going around too. Right now, if you didn't, then I'd be like, now I'm more likely to not play this lineup. Now it's like, okay, maybe I play a very similar lineup, but I just change one guy. I go, well, I'm not going to stack the main event. I'm just going to play one of them and play McCool or something, play whatever, someone else, so I can get 6 wins. If they told me about the tiebreaker thing, I probably would have still played this lineup. Now, the thing is that now that we know that 6 people played it and 4 advanced, that becomes even better than a double up style contest. So what incentive do I have to not play the line value optimal lineup with the main event stack? Like what? Like if you differ from that 4 out of 6 and are wrong, and let's say let's say an exaggeration, let's say you knew that if I knew that my 5 opponents were going to play that lineup exactly. Let's say I knew that exactly. Like if I played that lineup, then basically DraftKings is forced to run another tiebreaker the net following week. But if I differ even by 1 and am right, I advance, and then they have to play a 4 out of 5 tiebreaker. If I'm wrong,
eventually with this, it goes down to the path of somebody else. Like you did it first, and then now it's a best 4 out of 5 the next week, and then somebody else does it, and then there's no reason to do anything else because
as long as 2 people lose, right? As long as one person deviates and then they both lose, right? But I'm saying, but this would be much different. For instance, if let's say we all tied for 30th, and it's now a 6-man tiebreaker with the only one going through. Now I don't have. Now none of this dynamic works anymore because no one would be playing. Like it goes from at 4 out of 6 advancing. Is everyone going to play this lineup? To if 1 out of 6 advances, that no one would dare play this line. It goes that dramatically. Even if it was top 2 out of 6, I would probably not play a stacked lineup. I would probably play a line value lineup that only played 1 main event fighter and just let's see if I want to be able to get 6 wins type of lineup. And then if people are stacking, then so be it. But like, let's say it was 5 out of 6. Like what do I gain by not playing the lineup that, dude, I hope I almost, if they were paying 5 out of 6 advance, I'd almost hope I was duped.
Yeah.
Right. Because to me, you'd
want one person to be the odd man out and try to beat them.
Right. Because what's the worst case scenario in that scenario? Like, let's say 5 out of 6, to use the extreme example, 5 out of 6 advance, and one person deviates. And I play the lineup with 4 other people that play the same line. Okay. So look, from my point of view, if that person has a better lineup than the 5 of us, he goes through, and then we play a best 3 out of 5, right? Because there's 4 spots. We play a best 3 out of 5. In the better case scenario, all 5 of us go through to another tiebreaker 4 out of 5, and that guy goes down. Like in either way, like it comes down to, am I going to be playing next week 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 5? Those are the only two options there. But the person that deviates is, you're either going to go through on everyone to round 3, to round 2, or are you going to drop off?
Yep.
But the difference between moving on is it worth that risk? I don't, to me personally, I don't think so. It's not progressively paid out enough that it's worth the risk. Yet if it was a 1 out of 6, then do you think what they should do is, I'm trying to think of, is there a way for them to run like a head-to-head matrix, or
like March Madness, but for a qualifier ticket?
Yeah. Like there's going to be 2 more cards, and they run 2 3-mans. No, I think that would be better. They randomly put. I mean, you have to randomly put 2 3-mans, or run the 6. Or no, this is what. No, I think this is what they should do. If they wanted to make sure that there weren't going to be a million ties, 6 ties, run the 6-man, have first only the first place qualify, or the first 2 spots. Make it the only 2 spots go to round 3.
And do it 2 weeks in a row.
And to do it 2 weeks in a row, right. And then those 2 go through, and then the following week, you have, 2 go through, and the bottom leaves.
Yeah.
And something like that. And then you run a head-to-head or a 3-man for the last spot, like some combination of the 2, where you're not, when you're offering some more incentive to come in past the 50th percentile.
Yeah, because right now all it is like even me, I'm super accepting of risk in GPPs, and like the way that I even play contests like this, I still like I make assumptions about the way that I need to be playing pretty heavily. But even me, I would be like, yeah, dupe me, bro.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah,
Daniel Hutchings in the chat says, I mean, he backing me up. I mean, I essentially explained what he just said. With 4 out of 6 advancing users, you lose 2/3 of your equity when you lose. So you'd be crazy to deviate from the optimal.
Yeah, there's just no way. There's no way. I think
that's why
that,
I said it's not. It will not be nuts. Maybe I should ask. Maybe or get Pimple Popper to ask. He got a response of what happens if they run a tiebreaker and we all 6 of us tied twice, and they do it the next week. Like, what are you going to do?
right.
Are we going to have to put us in round? I mean, what? What? They should have thought of this before. I mean, you have to think of this. But I mean, if you played DFS, you'd have to think of this beforehand.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how many people are playing DFS on that side, but I mean, I digress. I think that the most elegant solution to it, I think, is the top 2 advance, the middle 2 go on to a head-to-head, and the last 2 are
done.
Yeah.
No, there's 4 spots. There's 4 spots.
Oh, okay. So the top 2 advance, the middle, and then the next 3 advance for the next one, and then the last one.
I mean, you get that same problem. I mean, I think you still get the same problem.
Yeah, there's not really a good solution here.
Well, I mean, I think it would be better if 3 out of 6, like, instead of making it 4 out of 6 advance, you make 3 out of 6 advance, and then the last 3.
Ooh, yeah. And okay, yeah. So you'll do, so for this next week, for the first one, you would play a double up, right? You'd play 50-50.
Play a 50-50.
Yeah, you'd play 50-50. And then the next week you'd play a triple up, and you play a 3-man. And then the winner would then that's best. That's right. That's right.
But even in a 50-50, I mean, then you're still more likely to play.
I'm still playing.
All we have to do is hope, or DraftKings has to hope that the card coming up has 14 fights, and the line value optimal lineup isn't like,
they basically have to hope that like there's no really weird like line switching, like that. Right. They have to hope that there's no line flip.
Right. This past card, it was a weird card with, number one, you have 2 5-round fights, only 11 fights on the card, right? A lot of times when you have 2 5-rounders, we're playing a 14-15 fight card, right? So it's 11 fights on the card. 2 of them are 5-rounders, and 4 of the fights offered where there were 2 fights where the underdog literally turned into the favorite, and then 2 favorites that turned into even much bigger favorites than they based on their price. So it's like, who are you playing in your lineup other than these like you're not playing any of these people other than those people?
Can I ask you a question really quick?
Sure.
For Liang Na, right? Like for the underdog to turn to a favorite. How many points of ownership do you think that added to her in the large field? So she was 42% owned in the large field contest. How much do you think that her going from an underdog to a favorite added in ownership? Do you think it was like 10 to 40? No, meaning she would have been 10%.
Dude, she was gonna be high owned even if she was an underdog.
That's what I'm asking. How much do you think
it didn't affect it? No, it didn't. I had her as under owned even at that number.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what I'm asking, because I'm trying to.
She ended up technically $600 underpriced, which is insane for MMA DFS. And it's not only that her money line moved, she was like plus 170 inside the distance as a dog. Like that fight, that female fight, was the most likely to finish inside the distance as the main event, which lasted 5 rounds, but everyone thought that would be over quick. So it's like that fight was like, if you switched the pricing on the fighters like completely, where Na was 8,600 and Gomez Juarez was 7,600 at closing, they both would have been efficiently owned.
Okay.
Right now, would not at 8,600. she would have been like probably like 18% owned. And Gomez Juarez, who had a plus 180 inside the distance line also, probably would have been like 29, 30% owned because of the price difference. So like even at 40% owned in large field GPP, I'd more of her because she was the most underpriced. She was under-owned. Because it's not just for cash games, like you care more about the money line win probability than the scoring probability. But in GPPs, you care more about if it's a fight, like for instance, the Whaley Joanna your Jacek fight.
Yeah.
That line moved also. Whaley opened at like minus 190 and she closed at like minus 160. And at 8,800, like Whaley's inside the distance was 340 and Joanna was like 800. Like that fight was the most likely to go the distance, which it didn't.
Yeah.
It ended in round 2. But Joanna was the line value like at 7,400, but she was only owned like 23%. She wasn't owned like 35%. Why? Because her inside the distance line is poor.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's like, oh yeah, Joanna wins and scores 75 points. Like for GPPs, that's just probably not going to be good enough. But for cash games, that's fine. So like if you were to play Joanna in cash games for the line value and the likelihood of going the distance, I completely got that.
Sure. Yeah.
But in GPP, you're not going to see the ownership go as far based on that money line move because the inside the distance lines are poor for the fight to begin with. It just so happened in the Na fight, like she flipped to be the favorite and she had like the fourth highest ITD line on the entire slate to begin with, even if she was the underdog.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Because I'm trying to take an info on that for building up ownership on my own because I don't, as usual, I am challenging myself to do something that I have not done before. And I'm taking like a couple different baseline stuff. I'm aggregating from only a couple sources, not a whole bunch, but then also trying to apply a bunch of globals to it to make it work. The main one that I whiffed on, I think was, who did I have projected high that just was not? I think it was Jake Matthews. I don't know. Anyway,
people over projected his ownership.
Yeah. Well, it was.
I had him at like 22.
I had him as a bad play, but
no, he closed. No. He closed as the favorite.
Only because I was projecting his ownership so high. I mean, like I had him projected as a bad leverage play because I had his ownership projected too high. So like that's kind of the hard thing I think algorithmically is sometimes you have these guys who like at 7,700 and as the favorite, like he's probably a pretty good play from like a very general point of view. But if you project him at 37% ownership, it's like,
then bet. It's the same thing for Jack Della Maddalena. Like I thought, fine for cash. His line moved so much, but the inside the distance line and at 39% ownership, his 100+ point probability wasn't high enough to warrant that. Of course, he got there, but that's probabilities.
Yeah, and I had him under projected. I had him projected 27%. So I'm just trying to get that teed in. Like I said before, I feel that I was directionally right, but I was not accurate enough for sure.
Right. I also did a thread yesterday on Twitter going through the lineups on an 11 fight card. There were lineups. There were several lineups that were duplicated over 200 times. There were like 2.2% of the total entries in the contest were duplicated 200 times.
That is a lot of the field. That's a lot.
7.6% of the field were lineups that were duplicated 100+ times.
How many times, Jordan, have we said that there's a lot of dead money in the large field contests? Yeah. And this is what we mean. Right. These lineups, this is 10% of the field, nearly 10% of the field. Those are dead lineups. Those are just bad.
For all intents and purposes, it's I don't believe. I mean, I haven't run. I do not believe there's any lineup that is duplicated more than 20 times that can be profitable.
Profitable in a
Long
short term
term.
or long term?
Yeah,
Long term.
long.
Okay.
I'm not talking about long. I'm talking about from an EV perspective. I'm not
No, I agree
saying
with
yeah,
that.
you played one lineup and you split and you got $8,000. Yeah, of course you could be profitable in one slate, but playing lineups that are duplicated 20 times, I don't know if you could find one that if you simulated it out that you would be profitable. Okay.
No, the payouts are not flat enough. You're just going to get eaten alive by rake.
Right.
Like
now that exists for lineups that are duplicated 10 times and 5 times also, but at 20, I almost see like if you told me that this lineup was going to be duplicated 20 times, I would just exit it. There's no chance. I mean, I consider those to be complete mistakes. Okay. 33.8% of the contest was lineups that were duplicated 20 times.
So even if we are to say, okay, maybe there's a feasible lineup duped 20 times, it can be profitable long term. Let's just give the benefit of the doubt.
Right. Maybe.
We're just saying that lineups duped 50 plus times are lineups that are just complete.
Right. If we say 50 is the cutoff, that covers the more than the rake.
That is more than the rake in large fields.
Right.
You're playing rake free so long as your lineup is not duped 50 plus times. You're playing rake free.
Right.
And if we are going to say 20 plus times, like you should be playing MMA DFS always.
I would say for this type of contest, it's 10 plus. I mean, it depends on the slate, but even at like I gave the benefit of the doubt for 20 plus. I think it's 5. Truthfully, on most slates, I think it's 5 plus, right? My goal making lineups is to make lineups that have high win probabilities that are duplicated less than 5 times. Like that's when I get uniques, I get uniques, but I prefer uniques that have high win probability, right? But I'll settle for 2 to 4, right? The lineups that are duped 2, 3, 4 times. I don't mind that. So to me, 5 plus anything past 5, anything 5 or over, if I'm playing a lineup like that, it was because of a calculation error or a trimming error or something. I don't mean to. That's the cost of doing business. 68.1% were duplicated 5 or more times. Because it's 11 fight card and it's harder to be unique. But then I go through this and 31.9% of entries were duplicated under 5 times, obviously. Just 11.9% were unique. About 70% of the entries total in the contest were 49.5 or more in salary, but only 3.9% of them were unique. Look how drastic that is. Can you find uniques that are 49.5 plus? Yes. And to me, they're valuable. But if you're going to go in, I mean, I saw people building lineups saying, oh, I'm building 5 lineups for the large field GPP. And I look at their lineups, it's like 49.9, 5,000, 50,000, 50,000, 49.8, 49.9. Like, why are you doing this?
Right.
And then on top of it, like some of their lineups are like 4 of the chalkiest people on the slate. And I'm like what are you trying to accomplish?
One of their 5 lineups is the one that you played in that live final qualifier.
Right. Something like that.
They're like, why are you playing this? You literally cannot place better than like 30th percentile. You literally cannot place better than that with that lineup.
Right. And then what I did, James, is I separated the 150 matches. Okay. Because we're going to make it general. I'm not saying everyone that plays 150 lineups is good. Okay. But on average, they're going to be the better plays. I only played 100 in, so mine don't even count to that. So I just counted the 150.
That means you're not a good player. You didn't play 150.
Right. It means I'm not a good player. I'm sorry. The 150 maxers represented 32.9% of all lineups in the contest, which is about normal. So they had 10,800 entries. They had 56% of all the lineups with under 5 dupes. So they represent a third of the field, but they have more than half of the under 5s, and they have more than half of the uniques. Okay, so their unique percent. If you just took all of their lineups and how many percent of their lineups in total were unique, 19% were unique. The rest of the field combined was 8.4%.
It's
and let me tell you, this includes some 150 maxers that are not that. There was one 150 maxer that literally had 0 lineups, 0 uniques, and 0 under 5s.
That sounds, yeah.
And that's someone that, if you simulate their outcomes, is a
Not
very
very
unprofitable player.
Yeah. And that comes from the psychology behind being of loss aversion, right? Like if people are playing in MMA DFS and they're like, oh, well, you know, I only have 5 lineups, so I want to give myself a chance to cash.
Right. This applies, by the way, let me just cut you off for a second. This applies to any format that has heavily amount of duplication.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about NBA Showdown, NFL Showdown, small fields golf events, got like League of Legends, like anything with very smaller player pools that you could choose from. 2-game and MLB slates, classic 2-game NFL slate. I mean, this applied to the concept of uniqueness and how duplication dramatically affects your expected value. Doesn't just apply to MMA. It applies to every sport, but in the very small, classic slates or showdown slates or things like that, where you could obviously run into a lot of duplicates. So continue.
And it's really important. But this is people who are entering these contests and entering these large fields, and they're saying, oh, well, I want to put together a lineup that gives me a chance to cash. And it's like, you're playing GPPs the wrong way. And the reason why people are playing GPPs the wrong way like that, if you're not playing to win the GPP, if you're not playing to build, specifically speaking to MMA, if you're not trying to build with lineups that are duped less than 5 times, if you're not trying to build lineups that have direct leverage over high leverage players and high owned players, if you are not building to win that contest, you're killing your expected value over a long term.
And your ROI. You're playing unprofitably. In the long run, you're
playing unprofitably, and that's the point that I'm trying to make, is that even if you cash in the short term, even if you cash with a lineup that is duped 10 plus times, or even if you win a GPP with a lineup that is duped 30 times, that over the long term, if you continue to play with that style, you're going to lose it all. Like you will not be a profitable player long term. You have to be building in a way to where when things go your way, you make the most possible profit off of the lineups that you built. And that's why when Jordan is pointing these out, the majority of the people who are the majority of the 150 players, they had 56% of all their lineups duped under 5. And that's significantly more than the field. Right? It's because these people understand that when they're putting in these lineups, if they do not win, then their long-term expected value is shot. You have to be thinking the same way. Even if you only build one lineup, it takes you 150 slates to get like 150 of those one lineups in, but you still have to be building in a way that is going to make it so if you win with that lineup, or if you do well, that the point is not to try to cash. The point is to win so that it makes it worthwhile when you actually do win. You're not going to win that often, especially with one lineup. You have to make it count when you do end up hitting.
Right. I'm showing here, like with the salaries, like that's one way of trying to be unique. Like if you used all of your salary on Saturday, there were 6,861 total lineups in the contest that used 50K. That's 21%. Out of that 20%, out of those 6,861, only 2% were unique. 2%. Okay. Now, if you could only play those lineups, congratulations.
Great job.
Great job. But if you're just saying as a bucket, like we used that marble example, I used it on the show before, all these buckets of marbles. It's like, okay, there's 6,800 marbles in this bucket, but only 100 of them are red marbles. And here's a bucket where there's 800 lineups and 200 are red marbles. Like it's easy. If I were to just grab into that bucket, just a handful, or I grab 10 in my hand, I'm more likely to grab uniques out of that, even though it's a smaller jar. I could even visibly see them. right? I could look and I go, oh yeah, there's 200 red marbles in there. I go to this big bourbon barrel filled with 7,000 or so marbles, and you go, yeah, there's about 100 in there somewhere. Like you're probably looking, you're like, you may not even be able to see, but you have to look closely. If you're doing anything where you're able to go with your little fingers and go, I'm going to pick out just the red marbles, that's one thing. But if you don't have any type of process like that, and you're like, nope, I'm building 20 lineups, let me just grab a handful, it's probably blunt from a blunt process standpoint to just cut out any 50,000, like just build in lineup HQ and just set the cap at 49.5 and just say, I'm not even going to, but yes, there are some unique lineups up there, but most of them aren't. Most of them aren't under 5. But once you get down to 49.4, half of these lineups are under 5s. So at worst case scenario, at random, if you set your cap on this past slate at 49.4 or below, and you randomly build 20 lineups, on average, you'd have 10 that are under 5. And you'd have 2. You'd have what? 10. You'd have like 2 that were unique. And you'd end up with 10. And you'd end up with 10. You'd end up with 8 that are over 5, but not many, that only 2 or 3 that are over 20. So like, just from a perspective of that, of like if you're going to take a blunt approach to building lineups, and this is for NFL Showdown, NBA Showdown, this is for any, like I said, it's not just MMA, for any small kind of 2-game NBA night slates and MLB night slates, Thanksgiving night slates for NFL. I mean, whatever the playoff slates, who knows, right? Taking a look of how could I make more unique lineups or less duplicated lineups. Don't think in terms of, oh, I got to leave, because I lambast Neil sometimes on the Theory of DFS podcast of like setting hard caps too much, because there are unique lineups up there and you're going to not lock yourself out. But if you don't have a process in order to do that, then I understand why you're doing it more bluntly, right? I used to do it more bluntly, and now I do it a little bit more nuanced. And still I miss plenty of times in doing that. But that's the difference between we spent an entire conversation today using MMA as the context, but like I said, it applies to everything. Of the difference between, like we talked about, James, the first half of this championship qualifier contest, where we're playing chicken on trying to duplicate each other, literally trying to, like going, is everyone going to play this? I hope 2 people don't play this lineup, right? To now talking about, when we're talking about a GPP, where we're avoiding, we think duplication is like the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, it's a cardinal sin.
Right, where people put in this line, I could probably bring this up, like a lineup. Let me get. I'm not sure if typically people don't stack as the most owned lineup. But I didn't actually look at what actually was the most duplicated lineup. But let me bring this up. Okay, so most duplicated lineups. So yeah, so.
Oh, there's McCool. Yeah.
Fialio. Oh wow, Fialio was actually the most. He ended up being the underdog in that slate. So 265 times. This is ridiculous. So he played the 2 main event favorites. Fialio, 2 other favorites, Malkoun, and that would fit in for 50,000.
Yeah. And then another 50,000.
Right. Here's another 50,000, 231. It's 49.8. But it's the highest owned people, and it's the highest owned. I mean, but look at these lineups. 226, 191, 180, 180, 161, 142, 137. Like imagine. I believe like about the total, like what's the total prize pool? Let's just say the total prize pool in these contests. What's the total? No, that's not the wrong contest. Like it's like $350,000. Let's say we award $350,000 divided by 265. $132 is no, 350,000. Okay. So if it splits 350,000, that lineup that's duplicated 265 times, you will get paid 1,320 bucks for winning 150 to first, 50,000 a first contest. Okay. If you play a lineup like down here, the 127, like that, you just pretty much double it. 27.55. You're paying the same price per entry as I am, as someone else is, and your the max upon upload, right? As of 7:01 p.m. Eastern, you're dead. Your EV is just right? It's like you could look at your lineups and go, yeah, well, these are the guys that I got. If Malkoon wins, if whatever like that, you're dreaming of your $150,000. And then you're probably going, yeah, maybe it's duped a couple of times. And then it's duped 265 times, right?
But what about when people win it and then they go and they're like, yeah, I took it down with 265 of my friends. You're like, don't
what I call that?
Show people that you're doing that to yourself.
Right. I call that broadcasting your stupidity.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that.
But looking at just to close this out, to go back to the 150 maxer thing, like take a look. I mean, typically guys like Brian Jester, ET Phone Home, Dalladino are pretty good at finding uniques, right? And like Dalladino was the highest amount of uniques, 98.
Hard slate for unique.
146 under fives, right? That's good. I mean, you go down here. Like if you look at me, right? But look at me. 100 entries, 94 under fives. Yep. 29 uniques. But like I said, my unique percentage was 94%. Right? Look at all the people up here. I'm towards the top of the under 5% range. Under 5%. Right? I'm 94. There aren't that many that have 90 plus. Right? I'm in the top 10 of under fives for my 100. Because that's what that's what I'm optimizing for. So I know I'm going to have less uniques. I know. I'm perfectly aware of that. But then you go down some, like these are all some of the most profitable players in MMA DFS. You're looking through, I'm looking at Reform Racer, Squirrel, we have Squirrel Patrol in here, right? Dark Manalook, OCD, Giant Squid, right? Going through.
Pretty good players there.
Right, pretty good players on the MMA leaderboard, right? McLovin is a little bit closer to me, right? Doesn't play as many. Right, Larry Oto's here with a lot of like Larry Oto. See, a lot of times Larry Oto's up with the uniques. Mm-hmm. Larry Oto is kind of down there with me, right? With the amount of under fives, like more under fives than uniques. We go Cerbrit, very similar to me. Also, more under fives than uniques, but still a ton of them. But then I maybe have to start calling out people. Go down to. So let's go by entry. Yeah, because we have to go by entries. Right. So 150 entries. Right. So under 5 dupes, and here's uniques. Here's all these 150 maxers. All these, we start going down. Big T.
Oh,
half
no.
and half. Got 71 out of 150. Okay. Give him some credit. Right. Right. There's some people like Sean Zan didn't seem to do all that well. Shrek. But decently enough. Not many unique. Yeah. I mean, because look at the salaries. The average salary is much higher.
Yeah.
Brick, same thing. But I mean, this is okay for 11 fight card. Okay, I get it. Then you go down. There's some. I mean, when you go down to some, I mean, look. How do you have 150 lineups and only have 4 under fives?
That's pretty bad.
That's pretty bad. Under 5, 11, 3, 11. Right. And some of these guys are pretty good, like Buffoon 13. I consider him a pretty good player, but on the slate, his average salary was 49.9, 20 under fives. I can't see how that's profitable long term. Playing 150 lineups. But normally on other slates, he'd be towards the top. So I mean, like, I don't know if there's an approach difference or just just plain out mistakes. There are plenty of times that just like, dang, I didn't get this right and I paid the price. I mean, I don't know. But this is where all the edges. in these types of contests, not just MMA, small selection format types of contests.
Yeah. Anything where you can be duped a lot, you got to focus on it. And you just got to focus on it.
Okay. And we talk about this. We talk about a bunch of this, not in detail, but enough. In the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports, it's a 15-hour audio DFS masterclass at theoryofdfs.com. But James, coming soon. We're coming out with the sequel, and people may be going like, well, how could, like, they're looking at what I was just looking at and going, well, how do I like get to see what the dupes are in a contest and anything like that? Is maybe we can include something, some Excel tools.
I think we will. I think we will. Yeah, that's something that might be pretty valuable, pretty good value proposition. I think the time that it takes to build these things, maybe you can't build them yourself. I totally understand that. I think some of these things are pretty difficult to build, like the tool that Jordan was just using to show his dupes, that website where you can see all the CSV stuff. Wouldn't it be cool if you had that yourself? Maybe you will.
And I do kind of had that myself, but I'd set up whatever you make for these tools is going to be so much better than what I do.
Yeah, well,
I have to do everything manually all the time. Like I'm nothing's automatic. That the people are asking me questions. They're going, well, you simulate the results. It's like, dude, it's going to take me 5 hours to set this up. They go, what do you mean it takes 5? You don't save what you have? It's like not really, because I have to line up all the columns. I have to line everything up and change. And I'm typing in people's names and numbers in. I mean, I'm not pulling stuff like, and people are like, well, can you run this? It's like, no, this is something that I do every like month or two. Right. Yeah. I'm going, okay, let me take a look and see if I'm on, okay, if I run this, if I run that. And then most of the time, James, I got everything set up in about an hour or so, which is still absurdly too long. And it always, I don't think I've ever calculated anything correctly in the first several tries. Several. Where I run it and the numbers that come out just don't make any sense. Yeah. Like they're just like, okay, this lineup has an ROI of it's giving me the scientific notations, right? Right. It's giving me that this lineup obviously has a profitability past like the entire world's wealth. That is like, okay, this is obviously being calculated wrong. And then sometimes I get the other end of the spectrum where it's like, oh, every lineup show it by the contest has lost more money than the contest has. like it's like, okay, if you run all these if all these lineups were in the contest, they'd all lose about $3 million. It's like, but the contest doesn't have $3 million in liquidity. How is that possible? Then I find out that there's some parentheses in the wrong spot or some decimal in the wrong place. And this is why you're going to build some simple tools for some of these things.
Yeah.
So even I personally could have something, because like this website that I use is just like it costs a couple of bucks a month. It's like, this is easier than me doing it. So I'm just going to use this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And I know it's going to be, I know it's going to be correct.
Yep.
But paydirtdfs.com, paydirt_DFS. You have tools and stuff there. You have you create stuff for your site, right?
I do indeed create stuff for my site. I've done a lot of work on the look and the SEO for the site over the last week, and it's really improved a lot of things in terms of like my viewership and everything like that. So that's been awesome. I added an MMA model for this last weekend. I'm going to be adding PGA Showdown coming up on this next weekend as well. And if you're into baseball, I post a true average report every day that is free and has been very strong. So that's my site. And you can obviously follow me at paydirt_DFS on Twitter if you want to be annoyed by me marketing my site a lot.
Right, there you go. Powerful projections, dedicated coaching, Paydirt community. You have the call to action buttons.
I do.
With benefit driven, join paid. Okay, you're doing better.
It's so much better, dude. I put so much work into it after like you just roasted me on Hive. Okay. I was like, I cannot continue to let him do that to me. So
but it makes sense. I mean, you could do more, but at least you're accomplishing like what it is that you do. You know, you're not putting any extraneous crap on it.
Right. Yeah. And
that doesn't accomplish anything.
Yeah, that was a big thing. And thank you for your free consulting on putting that together.
But it doesn't take much for me to shit on something. I do that for nothing.
Yeah, you do it for fun. So
right, I do it for fun. Right. Okay, so follow James at Payout_DFS. Follow me on Twitter at BlenderHD. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. You know when we go live. We got Grinders live later today. Going over the 10-game MLB slate. Roth and the guys will be on Crunch Time, which is free, presented by FanDuel every night. And that's that weather updates. I think that there may be a weather game or two on the schedule tonight. And I'll be back tomorrow. I'll probably be playing on FanDuel tonight. But we'll be going over reviewing tonight's slate on tomorrow's show and talking about DFS strategy, answering your questions like I always do on the DFS pregame show on RotoGrinders.com.